Ladies and gentlemen, kings and queens, hear me when I say this. You were not created to live in fear. You were created to dominate it. Fear is not your master. Fear is a lie. It's a parasite that survives only when you feed it your potential. It shows up dressed like protection, but its only mission is destruction. And today, we're not negotiating with fear. We're not managing it. We are destroying it forever. Fear has a way of dressing itself in authority. It shows up in your mind like it belongs there, like it has the right to govern your thoughts, your decisions, your direction. It speaks with confidence, pretending to be logic, posing as caution, whispering that it's only trying to help you survive. And because it's loud and familiar, we start believing that maybe it's right. Maybe it knows something we don't. But the truth is, fear is a liar in a suit, selling you chains with a smile. Fear convinces you that you're safer standing still. It says, don't speak up, you'll embarrass yourself. Don't try that business, you'll fail. Don't get too excited, something always goes wrong. It wraps itself around your dreams, your talents, your identity, and it begins to squeeze. The tighter you cling to the illusion of safety, the more power you give fear to dictate your path. But fear doesn't want to protect you. It wants to own you. It masquerades as wisdom, but it's really just hesitation in disguise. Fear pretends it's helping you be smart, be calculated, be prepared, but what it's really doing is stalling your purpose. It's holding you hostage with worst-case scenarios, magnifying what could go wrong while completely ignoring what could go right. It doesn't show you the vision of you winning. It only replays the scene of you falling. And the more you replay it, the more you begin to believe it's inevitable. Fear is not some mystical force that comes from outside of you. It's a belief system that grows inside you when you feed it. It grows when you repeat its language. It grows when you give it room to stay. The moment you make space for fear, you give it a seat at the table of your life. And if you're not careful, it will start speaking for you, deciding for you, and eventually living for you, sometimes living. People talk about conquering fear as if it's an enemy standing in front of them. But most of the time, fear isn't in front of you, it's within you. It's the quiet agreement you made years ago to play it safe. It's the deal you struck when you decided you weren't good enough or smart enough or worthy enough to take the shot. And now it's operating in your voice, in your habits, in your daily decisions, making you shrink when you were born to stand tall. Fear has no original thoughts. It only echoes what you've told it. It takes your insecurities and amplifies them. It takes your doubts and plays them on repeat. But what fear doesn't want you to realize is that you created it, and that means you have the power to uncreate it. You made fear a habit, and just like any habit, it can be broken, replaced, and rewritten, but only if you're willing to challenge the lies you've believed for too long. The problem is, fear sounds like your own voice. It doesn't scream, it suggests. Maybe you're not ready. Maybe you should wait a little longer. Maybe this isn't the right time. And you start mistaking fear for wisdom. You call it being realistic. You call it timing. But deep down, you know those are just polished versions of procrastination. The fear is still in charge. It's just wearing different clothes. When you allow fear to lead, your vision starts shrinking. Your goals become smaller. Your prayers become safer. You begin to settle for comfort over calling, routine over risk, and average over excellence. You may still be breathing, but you're no longer living. Because fear doesn't just steal your future, it numbs your present. It convinces you that avoiding discomfort is more important than achieving destiny. Fear doesn't need to be strong to stop you. It only needs to be consistent. It doesn't kick the door down. It whispers at it every day until you stop knocking. It doesn't throw punches. It chips away at your confidence with tiny lies, small distractions, and just enough doubt to keep you second guessing. And if you're not careful, you'll wake up one day with a lifetime of regret disguised as safety. So many people wait for fear to leave before they move. They wait to feel brave before they start. But fear doesn't leave on its own. It has to be evicted. It has to be starved. It has to be confronted. And it starts with recognizing that fear is not your master. It never was, it never had real authority, it only had your agreement. Fear doesn't walk into your life looking like a villain. It doesn't announce itself with darkness or dread. No, fear is far more subtle and far more deceptive. It walks in wearing the mask of protection. It speaks in the tone of caution. It pretends to be the wise friend, the careful voice, the one trying to keep you from harm. And because it's quiet and familiar, you trust it. You let it in. You let it stay. You mistake it for love when all it's doing is building a cage around your life. It sounds like, let's be realistic, or maybe it's not the right time, or even, I just want to make sure I'm safe. But fear's version of safety is suffocation. It doesn't want to protect you. It wants to prevent you from failing, yes, but also from flying. It wants to keep you from rejection, but it will also keep you from connection. It will protect you from disappointment, but it will also block your access to joy, success, and fulfillment. When fear disguises itself as protection, it doesn't demand that you stop. It just gently nudges you to delay, to postpone, to pause until things feel right. But the right moment never comes because fear doesn't wait for the right moment. It kills it. It feeds on hesitation. It multiplies in indecision. And before you realize it, fear has convinced you to call your stagnation stability. This disguise works because it appeals to a deep need inside all of us, the need to feel safe, seen, and secure. Fear hijacks that need and offers counterfeits. It offers comfort in exchange for courage. It offers quiet in exchange for voice. And you might not feel the loss at first because fear never robs you all at once. It takes your life one dream at a time, one opportunity at a time, until your days are filled with what ifs and your nights are haunted by almost. Fear whispers things like, you're not ready, or you need more time, or it's too risky. It doesn't say, don't go after your dream. It says, be smart, wait, protect yourself. And it sounds reasonable, but reasonable is not always right. Logical is not always leadership. Playing it safe can sometimes be the most dangerous thing you'll ever do, because the longer you stay in protection mode, the more you start living on defense instead of walking in purpose. It's easy to confuse fear with responsibility. You think you're being wise, careful, thoughtful. You tell yourself you're just preparing. But preparation without progress is procrastination. There's a difference between being strategic and being stuck. Fear knows the difference, even if you don't. That's why it lets you stay busy planning so you never have to start building. It lets you gather information forever so you never have to face implementation. The tragedy is that many people never see fear for what it is because they've accepted its disguise. They've accepted a watered down version of life because it feels safer. They've settled for average because it feels manageable. They've convinced themselves they're just being humble when in reality they're hiding. Fear convinces you that smallness is humility when it's really just self-preservation wrapped in fear. Fear will never tell you not to dream. It will just make sure you keep dreaming later. It will let you write the vision, make the plan, rehearse the speech, but it'll do everything it can to stop you from hitting go. It'll let you admire others, support others, cheer for others, just not take your own shot. Because if you ever really moved, you'd see that the walls fear built around you were never locked. You'd realize you had the key the whole time. The more fear is allowed to pretend it's protecting you, the more it gets to decide the limits of your life. It gets to define what's too much, too far, too risky. It becomes the filter for every decision you make. Relationships, business, faith, health. It doesn't need to push you hard. It only needs to redirect you slightly. A few degrees off course, long enough, becomes miles away from where you were meant to be. Fear knows it can't stop you with force, so it deceives you with false comfort. It builds a life around minimizing danger rather than maximizing destiny. It tells you stay small and nothing bad will happen. But what it doesn't say is that nothing great will happen either. It removes the threat of loss, but replaces it with a certainty of regret. It quiets the noise of failure, but silences the sound of progress. And if it can keep you believing that it's only trying to protect you, it never has to reveal what it's really trying to steal. The problem with how most people deal with fear is that they try to manage it. They treat it like an unruly pet that just needs to be trained or tamed. They create strategies to cope, techniques to calm it down, systems to keep it from interfering too much. But fear was never meant to be managed. It was meant to be destroyed. When you manage fear, you allow it to remain. You give it a seat in your life and say, just don't get too loud. But fear doesn't need to be loud to be lethal. It just needs to be present. Fear doesn't respect boundaries. You can try to box it in, to compartmentalize it, to isolate it to one area of your life, but it will find a way to bleed into the rest. You might be afraid only to speak up at work today, but tomorrow that same fear will show up in your relationships. It will keep you from being vulnerable, from telling the truth, from asking for what you need. What you tolerate will eventually infiltrate. That's why fear must be rooted out at the source. It cannot be allowed to survive under the guise of control. Managing fear turns into a lifestyle. You become a master of avoidance. You learn how to stay just under the radar, how to stay comfortable, how to avoid too much risk, too much visibility, too much pressure. You decorate your limitations and call them your personality. You adjust your dreams to accommodate your anxiety. You get so good at adapting to fear that you don't even recognize how much it's leading your life. And because you're functioning, you assume you're free, but you're not. You're functioning under fear's terms. There's a huge difference between functioning and thriving. People can function with fear all their lives and never truly live. They can perform, produce, show up, smile, and still be operating under the influence of silent terror. They're scared to disappoint, scared to fail, scared to be seen, scared to succeed. Fear has become the lens through which they see every opportunity. And instead of removing the lens, they just try to see better through it. But the lens is the problem. And managing it won't fix what's broken at the root. Fear is a thief with a sweet voice. It tells you, just let me stay in the corner. But while you sleep, it moves. While you hesitate, it builds walls. While you make excuses, it rewrites the narrative of your life. You think you're keeping it under control, but it's actually reprogramming your identity. Little by little, fear is changing the way you speak, the way you think, and you won't even realize how much of you has been lost to it until it's almost too late. People who try to manage fear often do so because they think that destroying it is too big, too bold, too unrealistic. They think if I can just keep it quiet, I'll be fine. But fear doesn't have to scream to be dangerous. A whisper can carry more destruction than a roar. It's not always the overwhelming panic that derails your life. It's the low-grade fear that lingers, the subtle doubt, the quiet hesitation, the constant second guessing. That's what wears you down. Destroying fear means confronting it directly. It means refusing to dance with it, to debate with it, to dress it up. It means looking it in the face and calling it what it is. It means deciding once and for all that you're not going to accommodate what you were meant to overcome. It means moving forward even when your hands are shaking, because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let fear make your decision. You cannot destroy fear with comfort. You destroy it with action, with movement, with confrontation. You step into the very thing it told you to run from. You speak when it says be silent. You go when it says stay. You try when it says quit. You launch when it says wait. Every time you choose boldness over safety, you are tearing fear apart, piece by piece. And the more you do it, the more powerless fear becomes. Not because it disappeared, but because it lost its influence. People often wait to feel fearless before they move, but that feeling never comes. Fear doesn't leave until you push past it. Waiting for fear to disappear before you act is like waiting for the storm to pass before you build the shelter. The storm exists to test your build. Managing fear is like putting a bucket under a leaky roof. Destruction is still happening, just slower. But when you destroy fear, you repair the root. You restore the structure. You reclaim the power that was always yours. Managing fear keeps you surviving. Destroying fear sets you free. And there's a world of difference between being alive and actually living. Fear doesn't want to kill you instantly. It wants to keep you quiet, safe, small, and contained. But you weren't made for containment. You were made for expansion. And there's no room for expansion when fear is in the driver's seat, no matter how quiet it pretends to be. Fear has a reputation it doesn't deserve. It walks around acting like it's powerful, like it's some unstoppable force that must be obeyed. It makes people believe it holds weight, like it has the final say. But fear is a fraud. It's not a force. It's a fabrication. It wears the uniform of power, but when you strip it down, it has no strength of its own. The only power fear has is the power you give it without your agreement. It's just noise, just smoke, just shadow. It presents itself like a wall you can't get through. You see it standing tall between you and your next level, and you assume it's solid. But when you walk up to it, when you actually put pressure on it, you realize it's not made of brick, it's made of paper. It crumbles under movement. It collapses when confronted. But if you never walk toward it, you never find out it's hollow, you'll stay stuck, intimidated by something that never had structure to begin with. The genius of fear is its illusion. It never shows up as what it really is. It exaggerates everything. It stretches possibility into disaster. It takes a what if and paints it like it's already happening. It makes you feel like you're in danger when you're just in discomfort. It turns nervousness into paralysis. It makes uncertainty feel like failure, and because you feel it so deeply, you think it's real, but emotion isn't evidence. Just because you feel fear doesn't mean you have to follow it. Fear doesn't operate with truth. It operates with distortion. It twists reality. It takes one negative outcome and puts it on repeat in your mind. It builds a case against your potential using your past. It reminds you of every time you hesitated, every time you stumbled, every time you doubted, and then tells you that's who you are. It doesn't want you to question it. It doesn't want you to slow down and analyze. It just wants you to submit. But when you stop to examine it, you start to expose it. People treat fear like it's an authority, like it has the right to tell you what you can or can't do. But fear doesn't come from knowledge, it comes from assumption. It doesn't have facts, only fiction. It doesn't bring evidence, just imagination that's been hijacked. And if your imagination can be corrupted by fear, it can also be reclaimed by faith. The same mind that builds prisons out of possibilities can build empires out of vision. Fear acts like it's protecting you, but really it's projecting. It's not showing you the future. It's replaying old trauma in a new disguise. It's taking old wounds and dressing them in today's clothes. It's not forecasting, it's recycling. And when you treat fear like a compass, you end up navigating by pain instead of purpose. You end up building your life around defense instead of design. And that's how dreams die, not in failure, but in avoidance. The fraud of fear is that it always sounds like wisdom. It always shows up with logical sounding reasons. It's not the right time. You need more experience. Wait until you're more confident. But those phrases aren't rooted in truth. They're rooted in hesitation. They're the language of delay disguised as discipline. And the longer you listen, the more you become fluent in excuses. Eventually, you don't even need fear to speak anymore. You've internalized the script. Fear loves silence. It thrives in isolation. As long as you don't challenge it, it keeps growing. As long as you don't speak out loud, you stay stuck in your head. But the moment you open your mouth, the moment you start confronting it, it begins to shrink. Because fear doesn't survive in the light. It can't stand exposure. That's why it tries to keep you quiet. That's why it tells you to hide. Because the minute you call it out, you weaken its grip. We live in a world where fear has been normalized. People expect to be afraid. They prepare for fear. They plan around it. It becomes part of their identity. But what if it wasn't? What if fear wasn't a part of who you are, but an enemy of who you could become? What if the thing you've been managing, tolerating, and justifying is actually the one thing standing between you and everything you were born to do? That's not just discomfort. That's theft. And the thief is pretending to be your friend. Once you understand that fear is not a force, it changes everything. You stop bowing to it. You stop consulting it. You stop waiting for it to leave. You start realizing it never had the right to speak over your life in the first place. You start moving differently, not because fear is gone, but because you no longer let frauds write your future. And when fear loses its influence, vision takes its place. Fear behaves like every bully you've ever met. It doesn't start with strength, it starts with intimidation. It walks into your life loud and aggressive, puffed up and overconfident, hoping you'll shrink the moment it speaks. Fear pushes because it assumes you won't push back. It yells because it assumes you'll stay quiet. Like any bully, fear's power isn't real, it's perceived. It depends on your silence. It feeds on your retreat. The moment you stand tall and push back, you begin to realize how weak it really is. Fear tests you early and often. It starts small, a little hesitation here, a quick doubt there. Then it escalates. It starts showing up in your decisions, your dreams, your conversations. It whispers, what if you fail? What if they laugh? What if it doesn't work? And if you don't check it, if you don't challenge it, it grows. It starts bossing you around. You begin to second guess your calling. You question your ability. You hold back your voice, not because fear was ever stronger than you, but because you believed its bluff. Bullies always aim for the insecure spots. Fear knows exactly where you're uncertain, and it attacks with precision. It knows where your self-doubt lives, and it camps out there. You're not good enough. You're not ready. You're too much. You're not enough. It throws all of that at you, not because it's true, but because it hopes you'll believe it. It knows if it can keep you distracted with insecurity, you won't make room for authority. If it can keep you timid, it can keep you small. Fear wants you to forget who you are. It wants you to forget what you've overcome. It doesn't want you to remember the strength that carried you through the last storm, the grace that pulled you out of the last failure, the power that lifted you after your last mistake. It hopes you'll ignore your progress and focus on your pain, because if you forget what you've conquered, you'll hand over today's battle without even trying. Bullies always want you to forget your track record. The truth is, fear knows it can't win against a person who knows their identity. So it attacks your identity before it attacks your opportunity. That's why when you dream big, fear shows up fast, not because you're wrong, but because you're right. Fear doesn't show up for average ideas. It shows up when you're onto something real, something dangerous to the lies you've believed. And it knows if you ever realize that truth, its time is up. So it shouts louder, hoping you'll sit back down. You can't reason with a bully. You can't negotiate your way out of fear. You don't tame it, you confront it. You don't manage it, you move through it. You stand tall even when your knees are shaking. You speak truth even when your voice trembles. You do the thing fear told you not to do. You send the email, you make the call, you launch the project, you show up, you take the shot. That's how you take power back. From movement, not from waiting. Bullies thrive in crowds where no one stands up. Fear grows in cultures where silence is normal, where playing small is celebrated, where doubt is treated like wisdom. But when one person stands up, it changes the atmosphere. One act of boldness exposes the lie. One courageous move makes fear lose its grip. And when others see you refuse to back down, it gives them permission to rise too. Fear may target individuals, but it infects communities until someone decides enough is enough. Standing up to fear doesn't mean you stop feeling it. It means you stop following it. It means you stop giving it permission to steer your decisions. You feel the fear and you walk anyway. You hear the doubt and you speak anyway. You sense the risk and you build anyway. Because courage isn't about feeling strong. It's about choosing truth even when fear is shouting. It's about remembering who you are even when the lie seems loud. Fear is a pattern. It's a script you've learned, rehearsed, and accepted. And like any bad habit, it can be broken. You stand up to it by changing the narrative. You don't say, what if I fail? You say, what if I fly? You don't say, I don't know if I'm ready. You say, I was born for this. You don't say, I've never done it before. You say, that's exactly why I'm doing it now. You rewrite the story. You flip the script because your future deserves a voice stronger than your fear. The longer you let fear push you around, the more normal it feels. But the moment you resist, everything changes. Fear expects obedience. When it doesn't get it, it gets smaller, it retreats, it loses momentum. And each time you stand up to it, you get stronger. Not because the fear stops showing up, but because you stop bowing. Fear might knock on your door tomorrow, but you won't answer the same way. You'll show up differently. You'll speak differently. Because once you stand up to a bully, you never see them the same way again. Your voice is not just sound, it's strategy, it's power, it's movement. And when you realize that, you stop treating your words like casual conversation and start using them like tools of transformation. You were never meant to be silent. You were never meant to be small. Your voice was designed to shake atmospheres, shift mindsets, and summon things that didn't exist before you spoke. There's a reason fear tries to silence you, because your voice is the first weapon that threatens its agenda. The enemy doesn't attack your voice randomly. It knows that the moment you speak, you activate purpose. The moment you open your mouth in truth, you disrupt the lie. Fear, doubt, insecurity, they all depend on your silence to survive. They grow in the quiet, in the hesitation, in the internal whisper that never becomes a declaration. But when you speak, the illusion starts to crumble. When you speak, confusion starts to clear. When you speak, you stop aligning with fear and start aligning with faith. Your voice is creative. When you speak life, you create life. When you speak belief, you birth possibility. When you speak vision, you draw it closer. The world is shaped by the voices that dare to say what they see before it's visible. Some people wait until it's safe to speak. But leaders, visionaries, creators, and warriors, they speak until it's safe. Your voice builds what doesn't exist yet. It plants the seed in a world that's still barren. It waters the dream others are afraid to name. Too many people have let fear rob them of their sound. They've learned to hold back, to filter, to calculate every word, hoping not to offend, not to be wrong, not to be exposed. But the more you censor your truth, the more muted your life becomes. You were not given a voice to echo safety. You were given a voice to call forth destiny. Playing small doesn't protect you. It starves you. Your silence may keep you comfortable, but it will never keep you fulfilled. Your voice carries identity. When you speak authentically, you step fully into who you are. You stop pretending, performing, pleasing. You stop blending in to survive and start standing out to lead. And when you use your voice like that, it creates clarity, not just for you, but for others. People who've been waiting to hear someone say what they've been feeling start to wake up. Your courage to speak becomes someone else's permission to be real. That's how movements are born. Not from noise, but from authenticity. And don't confuse volume with power. Some of the strongest voices are quiet, but they are unshakable. Some of the most powerful people don't yell. They speak with such clarity and certainty that silence follows. It's not about how loud you are, it's about how aligned you are. A voice connected to purpose is louder than a room full of noise. A voice rooted in truth cuts through chaos like a sword. You don't need to be the loudest. You just need to be the realest. Every time you choose to speak truth over fear, you sharpen your voice. You refine your message. You grow your authority. You begin to carry weight that goes beyond charisma. It becomes conviction. And conviction speaks even when you're tired. It speaks even when you're nervous. It speaks even when you're outnumbered. That's the kind of voice the world remembers. That's the kind of voice that builds legacies. But understand this, if you don't use your voice, someone else will use theirs to define you. If you don't speak up for your life, someone else will narrate it. Silence is not neutral. It creates space for lies to breathe and take root. You either use your voice with intention or you live by someone else's definition of who you should be. And once you've been named by the world, it's a fight to get your identity back. That's why you speak now. Before the labels, before the doubt, before the damage. Your voice is not just for you. It's for every person who hears it and remembers who they are. It's for every person stuck in fear who needs a sound to follow out. It's for every generation after you who will either rise because of your truth or fall because of your silence. You don't have to be perfect to speak. You just have to be present. You don't have to know everything. You just have to own what you know. Because the sound of one person standing in truth is more powerful than 1,000 pretending in fear. There will always be resistance. There will always be moments where silence feels safer. But your voice is not here to serve comfort. It's here to confront limitation. It's here to declare what's possible when doubt says it's not. Every time you speak with courage, you break another layer of fear. Every time you refuse to be quiet, you shift the atmosphere around you. Not because you're trying to be loud, but because you finally understand your voice is a weapon and silence was never your assignment. When emotion locks you in place, motion is the key that unlocks the door. Emotions, especially fear, anxiety, doubt, and hesitation, thrive in stillness. They build momentum when you don't move. They gather weight when you pause too long. The longer you sit in an emotional state, the deeper its grip becomes. You overthink, replay conversations, imagine worst-case scenarios, and rehearse failure in your mind. And all of that happens in the absence of motion. But the moment you move, even just a little, the emotional atmosphere begins to shift. Fear doesn't need reality to survive. It needs stillness, because motion exposes its lie. When you act in spite of how you feel, you reveal that fear was never the ceiling, only the suggestion. Fear says, don't take the step, and you take it anyway. Doubt whispers, you're not ready, and you start anyway. And in those moments, emotion loses its authority. It doesn't get the final say when your actions don't align with its message. Your body moves forward while fear stays behind. It can scream, but it can't stop you. The problem isn't that we feel, it's that we wait. We wait until we feel ready. We wait until we feel confident. We wait until we feel peaceful. But what if those feelings don't show up until after we move? What if clarity comes on the other side of motion? What if peace meets you on the path, not at the starting line? Too many people are waiting for an emotional green light when they've already been given a green light through calling, purpose, and vision. You don't wait for courage, you build it in the movement. There's something powerful that happens when you refuse to match your motion to your mood. You wake up heavy, but you still show up. You feel unqualified, but you still take the mic. You're nervous, but you still make the call. That's when your brain starts to rewire itself. That's when your emotions learn they're no longer in charge. Motion becomes the master. Action becomes the driver. You stop bowing to every feeling and start building a life on decisions instead of moods. Even science backs it up. The mind and body are deeply connected, and physical movement has the power to disrupt negative emotional states. A walk, a workout, a task, a step, anything that involves motion starts to reset your chemistry. It doesn't mean the emotion disappears immediately, but it weakens, it softens, it loses its center. And in that space, new emotion is created. Confidence, clarity, momentum. Motion doesn't wait for permission. It takes the lead and demands everything else to follow. We don't think our way out of stuck places. We move our way out. Action breeds clarity. Clarity breeds confidence. Confidence builds consistency, and consistency transforms lives. But none of it begins in the realm of emotion. It all starts when you refuse to sit still, when you move while afraid, when you choose discipline over delay. That's where everything changes. Because the minute you make the decision to act, the emotion that once felt so permanent becomes temporary. The enemy of your growth is not just fear, it's passivity. It's the decision to sit and wait for the right mood, the right motivation, the right moment. But motion doesn't need the moment to be right. It creates the right moment. It brings what you need into alignment. It builds the environment that emotion was trying to withhold. You stop reacting and start creating. You shift from victim to builder. You stop hoping and start doing, because while others are still thinking about it, you've already taken 10 steps forward. This is why so many people stay in cycles. They think emotion needs to leave before action begins, but the cycle never breaks because the motion never starts. The lie is that you need to feel different before you act differently. But what if the opposite is true? What if acting differently is what makes you feel different? What if all the confidence, joy, power, and peace you're praying for is on the other side of disciplined, intentional, repeated motion. Emotion is real, but it's not always right. And when it becomes the compass, you start navigating by storms instead of stars. You lose direction, you get pulled off course. But motion anchors you, it grounds you. It becomes your declaration that truth, not feeling, leads your life. It says, I move because of who I am, not because of how I feel today. That's where emotional resilience is born. Not from denying how you feel, but from refusing to let feelings decide your future. And when motion becomes your pattern, emotion becomes your follower. Instead of being led by fear, you begin to lead it. Instead of being trapped by sadness, you start walking it out. Instead of being owned by overwhelm, you take small steps until your peace is louder than your panic. Emotion might ride in the car with you, but it doesn't touch the wheel because you've learned the secret. Motion destroys emotion. Every single time. Everything you want, everything you were created to become, everything that keeps you awake at night with excitement and longing, it's all sitting just beyond the grip of fear. Fear builds walls, not to imprison you physically, but to convince you that what's on the other side isn't worth the risk. It tricks you into believing that pain is permanent, rejection is fatal, and failure is your identity. And as long as you believe that, you'll keep living on the wrong side of your breakthrough. You'll pace in circles full of potential, but stuck in permission, not because you can't, but because fear convinced you not to try. That dream in your heart didn't come from nowhere. The vision you see in your mind, the life you know you were made for, it was deposited in you with purpose. But fear always stands in front of purpose. It challenges the call, it questions the vision, it magnifies the cost and minimizes the reward. And the lie it tells over and over again is that staying safe equals staying whole. But there is no wholeness in stagnation. You're not protecting your peace by playing small, you're avoiding the process that brings it. Most people don't fail because they weren't capable. They fail because they stopped. They let the fear of embarrassment outrun the hunger for transformation. They let the fear of being judged outweigh the joy of being fulfilled. So they chose comfort over calling. They chose the familiar over the future. And then they wonder why their life feels stuck on repeat. But life doesn't change because you wish it would. It changes when you step through the thing you're scared of. It changes when you do the uncomfortable thing, fully aware it might shake you, but also knowing it will grow you. Fear guards the gate to everything meaningful. It sits there like a bouncer, checking to see who's serious. It wants to know if you'll fold, flinch, or fight. And the moment you choose to lean in instead of leaning back, you gain access to what others will never experience. Freedom. Freedom from the mental cages of what if. Freedom from the emotional weight of regret. Freedom from the identity of almost. You weren't made to settle at the border of fear. You were made to break through it and build something on the other side. There are businesses, books, ideas, relationships, platforms, and movements waiting for you to stop negotiating with fear. Fear wants you to believe it's wise to wait, that you need more time, that you need to be more ready. But fear will always say not yet. It will always find one more excuse to hold you back because fear doesn't play fair. It studies your patterns, it finds your weakest points, and then it whispers in the voice of logic, pretending to be your protector. But protection that keeps you stuck isn't safety, it's sabotage. Everything you've ever admired in someone else, their boldness, their success, their influence, came from a moment when they chose to walk through fear instead of live beside it. They weren't fearless, they were just willing. Willing to look foolish, willing to fail, willing to be talked about, laughed at, misunderstood. But every step through fear stripped away the lie that fear was the final authority. With every move forward, they discovered that fear is a shadow. It only looks big when the light is behind you. Turn around, face it, and it starts to shrink. The danger isn't in the fear, the danger is in obeying it. Because once you start listening to fear, it doesn't stop with one area. It starts to expand. It touches your relationships. It touches your finances. It touches your self-image. It tells you not to try, not to ask, not to believe. And before long, you're living in a life that doesn't even look like yours, a life shaped by avoidance, a life built around limitation. But it only takes one act of defiance, one bold, imperfect, trembling step to start reclaiming what's yours. Courage isn't a personality trait, it's a decision. A decision to walk while afraid, to build while uncertain, to speak while shaking. It's the decision that says, I may not feel ready, but I'm done being ruled by a feeling, because that's the shift. Realizing fear doesn't leave first, action does. And the more you move through it, the more you desensitize yourself to its grip. You stop giving it credit it never earned. You stop calling it wisdom when it's really just worry in disguise. There is a version of you that already lives on the other side of fear. That version is bolder, freer, more focused, more aligned. That version says yes to opportunity. That version doesn't overthink every move. That version trusts their instincts and takes action without overanalyzing the consequence of every step. That version doesn't wait for someone else to validate the dream. They wake up and build it. That version is not imaginary. It's not some future self that arrives magically. It's who you become, one courageous decision at a time. Every moment you choose motion over emotion, boldness over doubt, alignment over approval, you step closer to everything that was meant for you. The life you were made for isn't waiting in the comfort zone. It's not sitting inside the echo chamber of fear. It's standing on the other side, calling you to break through, knowing that once you do, you'll never go back. Because fear is loud at the door, but it's silent once you cross it. Fear thrives in the absence of decision. It feeds off indecision, hesitation, and the maybe moments. When you don't make a choice, fear rushes in to fill the void. It loves to exist in the unknown, in the gray spaces, in the places where you haven't yet drawn a line. It's in these moments of uncertainty that fear speaks the loudest, convincing you that you need more time, more information, more security. But the truth is, all the time and information in the world will never ease the grip of fear until you make the decision to move forward, regardless of how you feel. Decision is the starting point, the turning point, and the point of power. Every decision you delay is a moment that fear controls. Each time you put something off because you're unsure, you hand fear the reins. You give it permission to define your direction. You convince yourself that you're being careful or wise, but in reality, you're just prolonging the inevitable. Every decision you avoid is a seed of doubt planted in your heart, a small message that says, I can't handle this yet, I'm not capable, or I'm not ready. But in the moment you make a decision, you take away fear's power to dictate your next move. The fear of failure, of judgment, of not being good enough, they all vanish the instant you decide, because decision is power. When you make a decision, you stop negotiating with fear. You stop asking for permission. You stop listening to the whispers that tell you to wait, to rethink, to retreat. The moment you decide, you break the chains that fear has wrapped around your possibilities. You choose the path, even if the path is unclear, even if the road ahead is hard to see. It's the decision that lights the way. Fear will always try to convince you that you need more time to think things through, that you need to wait for the right moment, but the right moment will never come until you choose it. It's easy to stay in the realm of what if, imagining every possible scenario, every consequence, every worst case outcome. But that's exactly where fear wants you, stuck in a mental loop, running around in circles of uncertainty, never taking that first step. The moment you decide, you break free of the cycle. You stop considering the what ifs and start facing the what is. And that is where momentum begins. When you make a decision, you create clarity. Fear thrives in confusion and ambiguity. It loves to hang out in the fog of uncertainty because that's where it can make the loudest noise. But when you choose, when you commit to a path, you bring clarity. Suddenly the haze lifts. What was once blurry becomes defined. The noise of fear gets quieter because decision silences its incessant chatter. You no longer need to ask for permission, and you don't need the world to agree with you. Your decision becomes your guide, your compass, and your motivation. Fear thrives on your ability to avoid commitment. It feeds off your reluctance to fully decide. And that reluctance often comes from an overwhelming sense of uncertainty and fear of making the wrong choice. But here's the secret. There is no perfect decision, no foolproof path, and no fail-safe plan. Every decision involves risk. Every decision involves some level of uncertainty. But once you make that choice, you stop being paralyzed by it. You begin to learn, grow, and adjust as you move forward, because progress comes from motion, not from the perfect decision. It's through choosing and committing that you develop the strength to course correct when things don't go as planned. Fear doesn't care about the specifics of your decision. It only cares about the fact that you're moving forward. It knows that once you make a choice, once you take a step, you're already farther than you were. It knows that action is the enemy of its power, because the more you act, the less room fear has to breathe. So when you choose, fear loses its authority. It no longer controls your thoughts, your time, or your energy. You regain control. You become the person who decides and moves, not the person who stays stuck in a never-ending loop of indecision. The magic happens in the moment you decide. Before you decide, fear will keep giving you reasons why you can't, why you shouldn't, why it's too risky, or why now is not the right time. But the second you decide, the conversation changes. The voice of fear starts to fade into the background, and the voice of your own inner strength rises to the front. You start thinking about solutions instead of problems. You start planning instead of waiting. Your energy shifts from paralysis to action. And once that shift happens, you realize that fear was never the problem. Your inability to choose was. Too many people are waiting for a sign, waiting for perfect circumstances, waiting until they feel 100% ready. But the truth is, you'll never feel completely ready. There will always be an element of fear, of doubt, of uncertainty. But that's the very point where the decision matters most. It's not about waiting until you feel ready. It's about deciding despite how you feel. When you choose to act in spite of your fear, you step into a different realm, one where fear becomes just another obstacle, not the final word. Decision is the antidote to fear because it forces you to confront it. Every time you make a decision, you confront the fear of uncertainty, the fear of rejection, the fear of failure. And each time you choose to move anyway, you prove to yourself that fear doesn't get to have the final say. It might show up, it might make its case, but you've already decided. And that decision becomes the foundation of your courage, your confidence, and your success. Fear is not a force you need to hide from. It's not an enemy to outrun. In fact, it's the very thing that, when faced head on, can unlock every door you've been praying to open. Most people believe that avoiding fear will keep them safe, that if they can just stay one step ahead of it, they'll be okay. But this is the trap that keeps them stuck. The more you run from fear, the stronger it becomes. The more you try to escape, the more it controls you. Running only feeds the lie that fear has power over you. But what if the key to freedom is not running away, but chasing it down? Fear is a signal that there is something worth pursuing. It's the indication that there's a challenge ahead, a goal within reach, or a breakthrough about to happen. Every time fear shows up, it's a sign that you're about to stretch beyond your current limits, that you're on the edge of growth. Instead of letting fear stop you, it's time to let it push you. Fear isn't there to paralyze you, it's there to propel you. It's the catalyst for change, the motivator for action, the spark that ignites courage in your heart. Fear is not an obstacle. It's the starting point of something greater. When you run from fear, you're not just avoiding discomfort. You're avoiding the growth that discomfort brings. Every time you turn away from fear, you choose the path of least resistance. And that path doesn't lead to transformation. It leads to stagnation. But when you chase fear down, you step into a space of unlimited possibility. You take control of your narrative. You decide that fear no longer gets to dictate your decision. Instead, you become the one in charge, the one who faces what most run from, the one who turns fear into fuel for their journey. Chasing fear requires a shift in mindset. It means seeing fear as a companion, not a foe. Instead of fearing fear itself, you begin to embrace it. You realize that fear is just a signal that you are moving in the right direction. Fear is not there to stop you, but to challenge you, to push you past your comfort zone into new territory where only growth happens. You start to see the moments when fear arises as opportunities to level up, to show up in ways that you've never shown up before. You stop letting fear decide the direction of your life. You decide. There is no such thing as a fearless person, but there are fearless actions. The people who seem to live without fear are often those who understand that fear is inevitable, but it's not the end of the road. It's the beginning. They know that fear doesn't go away, but their ability to take action in the face of fear grows stronger with every encounter. They chase fear down because they understand that it's only by taking action despite fear that they experience the victories they long for. Chasing fear is what transforms you from a person who waits for certainty into a person who creates it. Every time you chase fear, you reclaim the power fear tried to steal. Fear has the ability to shrink you, to make you doubt your capabilities, to make you think that you're not enough. But when you face it, you show fear that you have the authority to redefine the rules. You stop seeing fear as a limitation and start seeing it as a challenge to be conquered. With each step forward, you grow in confidence. You grow in courage. You begin to see that the more you run at fear, the smaller it gets and the bigger you become. You learn that fear only has the power you give it. The truth is, fear will always be there. It's a constant in the journey of life. The only question is whether you will allow it to control you or whether you will chase it down. Every step you take toward fear is a step toward freedom, because freedom isn't found in the absence of fear. It's found in the ability to act despite it. It's found in the moments when you stand tall, knowing that fear has no hold over you. It's in those moments that you find your true strength, your true potential, and your true purpose. Chasing fear requires you to get comfortable with discomfort. It means stepping into the unknown and not knowing what the outcome will be. It means having the courage to make the first move, even when you don't have all the answers. Most people are afraid of what they don't know, but the unknown is the birthplace of growth. The minute you stop running from fear and start chasing it, you enter a realm of infinite possibilities. The fear of the unknown becomes less about what could go wrong and more about what could go right. You start to lean into uncertainty, trusting that every experience will add to your growth. When you chase fear, you set a new standard for your life. You no longer wait for the perfect moment, the perfect opportunity, or the perfect conditions. You realize that perfection is an illusion, and the only thing that matters is your willingness to act in spite of fear. You begin to see every challenge, every obstacle, and every fearful thought as a stepping stone to something greater. Chasing fear doesn't just change your mindset, it changes your reality. It opens doors you never thought possible, and it turns setbacks into comebacks. Fear will always try to keep you from what you truly want, but if you're willing to chase it down, you'll realize that everything you desire is on the other side of it. When you refuse to let fear control your actions, you take back the power to create your own future. You stop being the victim of your circumstances and start becoming the victor of your decisions. Chasing fear is the boldest, most empowering choice you can make. It's a decision to stop playing small and to start living a life that is as big as your potential.